Hello and welcome to the second episode of Highway to SNL. My name's Andy.
My name's Chris.
And we're two UK fans of Saturday Night Live. And each episode we're going to analyse, discuss, have fun about, really, a different cast member. We started last episode with Dan Aykroyd and decided this episode to do Phil Hartman.
Yep. The history part of the podcast, like to prove we actually do some research on this. So Phil Hartman, born in 1948 in Barkford, which is in Canada. So another Canadian. I feel Canadians are going to come up quite a lot in this podcast series. So he's started off his career. He was a graphic artist, hugely talented person in many different ways besides comedy. He did album covers for Poco in America. He created the Crosby, Stills and Nash logo, all this stuff. But he always had enjoyment of performing, and he wanted to find a way of releasing that. And so in 1975, he joined the Groundlings, the improv troupe, very famous in America. A lot of other SNL cast members, past and present, have come from the Groundlings. And in the Groundlings, he was pretty much seen as like the granddaddy of the Groundlings. He was like the man. He ended up being a teacher there and teaching their programs and stuff. And hugely famous. It was in a time when comedians, certainly members of SNL cast, as they were joining and still working out, they didn't have much money. They were living in each other's basements or whatever and stuff. And he owned a car. He owned a house. I think it's interesting, the story of how he got to be on SNL, because the history of SNL at the time, we're talking mid-80s, was very, very different. Obviously, we had the glory days of the golden cast, of one of whom Dan Aykroyd, who we talked about last time, was. And then how do you follow that? And so they never really got it right. And I think probably the only standout cast member after that for a while was Eddie Murphy, who did 2 seasons. Then obviously became a huge superstar. And then in 1985, they had this grand idea of getting rid of the entire cast and replacing them with young actors.
Yeah.
So we had Robert Downey Jr., Robert Michael Hall.
Anthony Michael Hall.
Thank you.
Yeah. Was that when Julia Louis-Dreyfus came in as well? She was around that.
Yes, I think it was Julie Dreyfus.
Yeah.
Quaid.
Yeah, the Randy.
The Randy of Quaid. And it went horribly wrong. And the famous sketch at the end of that was they burnt them all alive in a dressing room. The only person who was saved was John Lovitz. Yes. And they had to get a whole new cast. And so they hired some great young up-and-coming people like Dana Carvey and people like that came in. And then there was, as Dana Carvey described it, as this old guy that they were talking about. This 37-year-old man in a group of 20-somethings. Yeah. And that man was Phil Hartman. He didn't want to be famous. He didn't want to be part of SNL. He quit. He refused it once. Yeah. John Lovitz apparently convinced him to do it. John Lovitz is a very close friend of his. He sees Phil Hartman as a father figure. There's only 9 years difference between them. Yeah. And then he became probably, I think, one of the most important cast members of all time.
Yeah. And one who, when we first started talking about this, is one of the very first names we came up with. And I think the reason we chose it second was Dan Aykroyd went off to become a film star, a megastar, and Phil Hartman, for several reasons, didn't, but is loved. And obviously his career was cut short, but he's left such a mark with comedy and that show, as well as some other TV shows, that very important person to talk about, and one that we felt we had to do early.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think he's if you ever see these best SNL cast member lists of all time that American magazines put out and all the rest of it, he's always top 5. Yeah. I've seen a couple where he's been number 1.
Yep.
And he's his nickname was the Glue. Yeah. And it
stuck.
Hey! And I think you can tell why. I think you touched on that. His career after SNL wasn't the biggest, but he didn't want it to be.
No. But continued work, and he went on to news radio sitcom, which, to my knowledge, wasn't shown in the UK.
I'd never remember it being shown.
I bought the first season on DVD. I had to import it from America. Enjoyed it. Only watched it once. So for us, it's difficult to talk about that, but we know how big it was in America. And he was on that, and he was on The Simpsons from when it started till his death, wasn't he?
Yep, he was. Yeah.
And Troy McClure.
Troy McClure, Lionel Hutz,
and other voices as well, wasn't it?
The monorail man,
Yes.
the famous episode written by the guy whose name I could never remember, Conan O'Brien.
That's the fella.
That's the big ginger fella. You said him.
Yes. And yeah, a lot of people when you mention Phil Hartman do think Troy McClure, and I always think of the Planet of the Apes musical, which is one of the not just funniest things in Simpsons ever, one of the funniest things ever.
Yeah,
and brilliant. And it's one of those things of you can watch a sketch of his or show a sketch of his to someone who has, especially being British, who doesn't know what Saturday Night Live is, doesn't know who he is, and they'll have that look like, I know that voice. Yeah, I know that voice.
Yeah, I think it's his voice was. It was a man of many talents, but I think his voice was probably his biggest weapon, if you were, in comedy. It's so changeable, but it's always so distinctive. Yeah.
And great impressions, which we'll get on to mention soon. But there's I'm not going to put it in my favourite sketches, but have you ever seen it when he played Barbara Bush?
Yes.
Yeah, because that's a prime example of just him being charismatic. It's deliberately not a great impression. It's him with a wig on.
Yeah.
But it's hilarious, and it's one of those things that he makes that sketch his own. And just carries it off so well. And sometimes a bad impression, if done well, can be as funny as an accurate impression.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And he could do both.
Yeah. Sometimes his impressions were not the most spot on. He was never a Dana Carvey or
no, but sometimes they were. That was
sometimes they were. We're going to talk about two sketch each, where we're going to talk about his impressions. I think.
Yeah, but should we before the sketches because unlike Dan Aykroyd, he didn't go on to star in many films, but should we mention some of his films?
Oh, yeah, I think we should, definitely.
We won't do three each before.
I think we just open them up.
Yeah, but Phil Hartman did star in such films as... but the one most people will know him from, I think, is Jingle All the Way.
Yeah.
Which is a movie, when it came out, I'll be honest, I wasn't that keen on. It was, what year was that? That was like 96?
Around about then, yeah.
Yeah, and I would have been 15, and I didn't want to see Arnie in another comedy. I loved Twins and Kindergarten Cop, but this one was aimed at a younger audience. It was basically it was a kid's Christmas movie, and to me it looked dumb. But what I do remember when I watched it was Phil Hartman standing out as being, he was just an excellent arsehole in it. The neighbour who wants to sleep with the main guy's wife.
Yeah. And
he just does it so that's sort of, we know people like this, who put the nice act on. They think they're charming, but are really annoying, and they've got a motive. Yeah. But to do that and to make it funny is pretty amazing. Yeah. His performance is, the outstanding performance in that film. And it's the thing that I remember from that film, that and the fact the Big Show's in it. Yeah. I will say though, when I watch it nowadays, I do find the whole film funny. Yeah. I like Arnie. I think. Now I'm older, I get what he was doing at that point of his career. And to be fair, Sinbad's fine in it as well. Yeah. A rare film where he's not playing a genie. Oh, yeah, I knew what I was going to There we go. But it's not a Christmas movie I watch every year, but I will watch it when I can. Yeah. And he is, that's I'd say above average family comedy, and he's the best thing about it by far. Oh, yeah. I think it's there's a lot of Christmas family trash. Yes. Released. There's a podcast. There we go. Yeah. Christmas family trash. Every week we talk about some. Yeah. But no, I think it's just a nice film. But I think Phil Hartman is really because that was such a common theme. I think in the 80s and 90s of you have family man who's trying to do his best, but messes up. Yeah. And then you've got the sleazeball who's trying to
weasel his way in there.
Yeah.
And it was such a common trope of a character.
Yeah.
Like, I could name 20 films where that's a trope.
Yeah.
But he did it better than anybody else.
Yeah, he did. One thing what does bug me about films like this is, and now I'm older, it's like these families have all got massive houses. They can spend all the money they want. But because the dad's at work, they get annoyed. It's like, well, if he wasn't at work, you lad, you'd be out working. You'd have to get a paper round. You know what I mean? But anyway, I've gone off on one there. But
it's almost as if it's a criticism on the Reaganite,
almost
capitalist view of America in the 80s and 90s. Anyway,
shall we talk about now? A couple of years later, the last movie he was in, and he's actually got there's a thing at the end dedicated to him in this one, Small Soldiers, which is a movie I've only ever seen this one once, actually.
I think I've only seen it once as well.
And it's directed by Joe Dante, who is one of my favourite directors.
Yeah.
He's done Gremlins and Piranha and stuff. And that one I was a bit too old for when it came on, CGI Little Soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And does he play the same sort of character in this one?
Yes.
Yeah. It's
pretty similar.
Yeah, the sort of sleazeball. There's another one where... the reason I watched this film, I think, I didn't realise it was Joe Dante when it came out, was I think it came out just after he died. And I'm like, I need to see it.
Yeah. And
I remember him being great in it. Another PG, I think it might be a 12 now, to be fair, family film, where he's not the main guy. But then this one is sort of an ensemble cast, so there's no main guy really, you know.
No.
But another standout for him.
Yep.
So yeah,
I think he only made quality. I think his work outside of SNL was small, but you browse through his IMDb or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
there's nothing of poor quality.
No, well, no, I mean, there's a lot of cameos.
Yeah,
you know, films like Loaded Weapon 1, for example. He's in Jumpin' Jack Flash as a cameo. Very good cameo in So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Yeah,
he worked with a lot of SNL people. I think he looks like he kind of showed up for favours. Does he? I mean, Fletch Lives, for example, as another one. But he co-wrote Pee Wee's Big Adventure.
Yeah,
he co-wrote
he co-created the character. Yeah,
yeah, with
Paul Rubens,
with Pee Wee Herman. Yeah. But the last of the films I want to talk about in a bit more detail was a box office bomb. Dan Aykroyd's in it as well. Steve Martin's reimagining really of Sergeant Bilko, because in this he plays basically the villain who he's above Bilko, isn't he? And basically hates him. He's on to Bilko's tricks, and after his woman as well. And in this one he does the sleazy thing and the sort of Full Metal Jacket shouty army man, really, to word it simply. But you see the change in his ability so well from when he's being angry with Bilko to trying to impress the lead and lady to almost embarrassment for when he's shown up by Aykroyd, who's above him.
Yeah.
This, in general, I think this is an underrated movie. It was one that, Phil Silver's... I mean, Sergeant Bilko was never called Sergeant Bilko as a TV show. It was called The Phil Silvers Show. So no one could really see anybody else in this role. And I watch it as a silly slapstick comedy, and I generally think it's really good. It's just a shame that maybe if they hadn't called it Bilko.
Yeah.
But then it would just be accused of ripping Bilko off. Do you see what I mean? But in this, he's with Steve Martin, Dan Aykroyd, two Hollywood greats, not just comedy greats, and more than does his own with them. He's that role. He makes the villain funny. He's kind of, I don't want to say likable, but you do emphasise him because the character's a knob.
Yeah.
But so is Bilko.
Yeah.
And it's very close, but because of his mean temper, which he plays really well, you favour Bilko.
Yeah.
But if you stand back, they're both idiots.
Oh yeah.
Totally underrated film.
Yep. Yeah, I know. Well, I'm sure many times you brought up you bring up your love of Steve Martin.
Well,
but rightfully so.
It's with Steve Martin, I'd say Saturday Night Live helped his career a lot, but he also helped SNL because of how big he was, and even going back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And there's many sketches with Phil Hartman. So yeah, have you seen the when Steve Martin does he hosts, he does a song at the beginning, and he says about the whole song's like, I'm not going to phone it in tonight.
Yeah.
And Phil Hartman says, you'll see the Phil Hartman. They go, nah. Yeah, that bit's great. So that's the three of the bigger rolled films that I wanted to mention. Really.
Yeah,
but he pops up in so much. He did pop up in so much in the early 90s. Voice in films like Brave Little Toaster, which was a big kids film in the 80s, CB4, list goes on, to be honest. And just flicking through the old letterbox here, there's a lot of stuff he had small roles in I haven't even seen, which I really, really want to, and I will one day, hopefully.
Yeah. I think we touched on Simpsons, but I think we need to delve into that a bit more, because I think he was never a full-time cast member. I think it was obviously up until his untimely death was the most prolific guest star on there, but I think he's probably in as close to as many episodes as he's not in. I think in those first few seasons.
It feels like it anyway, but that's just because he's memorable. So
obviously he came over worked with Conan O'Brien on SNL, and obviously Conan then left to go and work on The Simpsons. Another writer whose name has slipped my mind, common thing is now someone, also went over, and so it was kind of like Conan O'Brien speaks obviously hugely of him. He wrote the character in the monorail sketch for Phil Hartman. He said, I had nobody else in my head. And he always had the impression that if they had a role for him, or if they wanted to bring back Lionel Hutz or Troy McClure, then it was like he was waiting on the end of the phone for that call. And he would just come in and record it. The consummate professional as well. That's another thing that a lot of the SNL cast will say about him. Like, hugely organised, hugely obsessive.
I don't think he could have been in that 75 to 79 cast, because I think obviously I didn't know the man, but I think he was too professional for that. He just wouldn't have gelled with them.
There's stories of him. He had a binder and had every sketch he was in, and he would walk around with his binder, and they'd be colour coded, and he'd know exactly what he was doing. I mean, he holds the record as the most sketches in one show and the most sketches in one season. I think there's one show he does 15 sketches. It was like only probably 2 sketches, including the monologue, that he wasn't in the entire show.
That's brilliant.
And they used to have to coordinate the show around his makeup changes. So it wasn't like, which sketch is going to work after this one? It was like, well, this sketch will work after. Oh no, because Phil's got to have his wig changed. So they had to put another sketch in to give Phil time to get changed.
So I think it's really interesting, because after the first 5 years worked, and then up until Hartman came into the show, it was kind of all over the place. And I think his professionalism, and like you said at the beginning, with how much John Lovitz adored him, really, and I think a lot of the cast did. He sort of held it together, and I think if he wasn't on the show, or someone like him, it could have just fallen apart, and there would be no SNL now. It was that little leap, and it wasn't until the early 90s really things really started to work again, and it became cool again, really. And he was there through that as well.
I mean, 8 years, I think, maybe even longer than that. He was. I think
it was 85 to 94. So 8-9 years.
And he was like the stalwart in all that, and saw cast change, come and go from like the 80s, that rebirth era where you had people who were purely sketch players, people from the Groundlings and they were doing lots of very sketch based work, and then you had obviously the 90s period. He was there with the bad boys of SNL, and the very much younger stand up comedians coming in.
So I think he was almost like a sort of Obi-Wan Kenobi on the cast, sort of there for them. But also he's another one like Aykroyd, we mentioned in the last episode, never steal a sketch.
No.
He's there to help the others, and 2 people he worked with really well, and so many of classic sketches. One's John Lovitz. Them 2 together was amazing, but Jan Hooks as well. And them 2, when I think of either of them, I kind of think the other one's there, and not a sketch that I've there's two that I haven't put in my top three, but there's a spoof Calvin Klein advert, Calvin Klein, with those two.
Yeah.
And there's I can't think of the name, like a black and white with them dancing sketch, which really reminds me of that, the classic John Belushi one where he's outlived all the cast members, and now that just feels weird. And this one is just so melancholy. It's not funny, and it's not meant to be. But they do these things sometimes, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
And those two together had such a chemistry, and I know they were really good friends, weren't they? So that shows. And I think they even appeared together when they cameoed in like Further Up from the Sun and stuff later.
Yes.
They definitely worked after. Yeah. But he was a team player, and for him to, I see him as he was part of two double acts as well on that show, which is pretty special, Whereas when you think of Farley and Spade, and certain people only gelled properly with one other person, he worked well with everyone, excelled with those two.
Yeah, I mean, the again, I've not picked them on my sketches, but apparently this came from something that Lovitz and he would do just when they were out and about, when they were friends beforehand, is the fast talking 1940s kind of. And there's a sketch with he's the agent, and he's like, "Yo, washed up, Johnny. What do you think? What's the one on the street? The one on the street is your trash."
Yeah,
and
that's one of my sketches.
Is it? Oh,
yeah, that's the Johnny O'Connor, isn't it? Yeah. So, but we can talk about that one now if you want.
Go for it,
because so that I don't know if that's a reoccurring one or not, because it's basically he plays Johnny O'Connor, who's an actor pre-war, and Lovitz is his agent, and he just basically tells him the negative response for all of it, and he just can't accept it, and the back and forth is amazing. And there's a bit in the Three Amigos which is just like that, and Lovitz and Phil Hartman are basically doing the same thing with the Three Amigos, and that's clearly where they, because that was written by Lorne Michaels, wasn't it?
Lorne Michaels,
so it was stolen from that, and that for me is the sketch they excel together with the quickfire, and then it ends with basically he's going to put him in a new up and coming movie, which is basically a Godzilla film, and he gets killed straight away. Yeah, but he's just so arrogant about it. He takes it as if it's a starring role. So that's the first of mine. I don't know. Should we dive into the do a sketch each now?
Yes, let's just dive into it. Sorry, I didn't realize it was sorry. So the first one of mine is it's one of his impressions. I think this is, we said that he gelled well with all the rest of the cast, and he was very humble in that way. But this, I think he steals the entire as he should, and that's the Frank Sinatra group. So this is I've got the dates. It's from 1991.
I deliberately didn't this time.
This is from 1991, 19th of January. Believe written by Schmeigel, and actually Schmeigel said in his when he was talking about this, he says that he described Hartman as a runaway train, and it is. So Hartman is playing Frank Sinatra. He's doing a open discussion panel with celebrities, all obviously impressions. You've got Sinead O'Connor. Jan Hook's playing Sinead O'Connor. You've got Sting in it, the man who invented rap. The man who invented reggae.
It's Billy Idol.
It's Billy Idol. Yeah. You've got Chris Rock in it as the person's name we've written down.
It's a rapper in it. Yeah, that's the one because this was my backup sketch.
Right.
I didn't know who he was supposed to be. I'll be honest.
It was from some rap band that I never heard of. And then you've got Mike Myers in it as well as somebody who toured with him. Again, I didn't recognise the name.
Mike Myers and it's Victoria Jackson as a couple who basically idolise Sinatra. His Sinatra impression is amazing. Apparently Frank Sinatra was not impressed by it, but it's just him playing this man who's Sinatra in his elderly years. He's out of touch, but he still thinks he rules the business. And he's just tearing these people apart. He's asking their opinions on stuff. I mean, it's not. There's a few trigger warnings in it. There's some words that you wouldn't use now. There is, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Such as?
It's the word in Fairy Tale from New York. Apparently, we're not allowed to say anymore.
Oh, yeah, Christmas.
Yeah, he describes Milli Vanilli.
He does, yeah, he does.
And it's Chris Rock is just being Chris Rock. And he goes, I can't tell what you're saying. It's all beeps and whistles. And then keeps describing. He's saying he's not talented, and he's like, you've got this Dionne Warwick thing about you, and stuff like skewing around the fact of his race.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's just letting these people, and he's being insulted to Sinead O'Connor. He keeps calling Sinead O'Connor, like he called her Sinbad Connor.
Yeah. Every time he mentions it, he gets the name wrong.
Cue ball, he calls it at one point. And then the big punchline at the end is Sting, as Billy Idol, starts having a go at him and says, "You're washed up," or whatever, "you're old." And he goes, I've written it down because I want to get it right. He says, "I pull chunks of people like you out of my stools."
That's written in my notes. A classic, and it's another example of everyone in this sketch is really good.
Yeah.
Even Sting as Billy Idol is really good. I have to say that. But it's him, like you say, the glue. He holds it all together, and he no sign of breaking through the whole film.
No.
Even though I did find a compilation of him breaking online. There's a lot. But he always covers it up well.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the amount of sketches he was in, and how in 9 years, there's going to be some in there.
Yeah.
You know. But that whole 9 years, he probably didn't break as much as Jimmy Fallon in one episode. So.
Well, it was outlawed. Lorne did not want breaking.
Oh.
On Saturday night, they were getting in trouble for breaking, and then apparently it became one person's entire shtick.
Yeah.
Highlights there will not be an episode on Jimmy Fallon.
Oh. So sorry, Schneider, we're picking on him this week.
Yeah, we're picking up. Schneider's coming up, ladies and gentlemen. Schneider's coming up.
He's in one of my sketches as well.
Yeah. So, but I just think it's just him as a tour de force.
Yeah.
Just incredible, ruling it, but then allowing everyone to get their little comedy bit in as well.
Yeah. Should I do my good impression one?
Yeah.
Then? It's the Bill Clinton in a fast food restaurant.
I love this.
This is before all the Monica Lewinsky stuff, I'm guessing. And it's basically if you remember the time of, you'd always see images of Bill Clinton jogging, keeping fit, blah blah blah, and this is a really stupid sketch of him jogging, taking a break, and meeting people it's clearly McDonald's, but they don't use the name, and just using every excuse possible to steal and eat food. And it goes on for ages, different reasons for doing it. Great impression. Loads of cast members in this.
Oh, it's in pretty much every single cast member.
Yeah, and there's always a ridiculous, do you mind if I have that bit? And just eating and just looking at how much food he actually eats while doing this sketch is quite amazing in itself, because he does eat it.
Yeah.
And it's just bonkers with a great impression. A little bit of politics in there, but mainly it's just stupid, and that's what I love about it. Even the fact that when he leaves the restaurant, it's his name escapes me. The guy who was in it for years, who was the ladies' man, Tim
Meadows.
Tim Meadows. Why don't I remember Tim Meadows? Does just a silly little jig as they leave.
Yeah,
and that made me crack up as much as anyway. But that's another example of great impression. Everyone's good in it. He excels. Farley shouts a lot, which is a weird thing.
He's not standard Farley.
But I think it is one actually where I think Farley tries to steal the scene a bit and doesn't. He can't. So yeah, another classic. That's my pick of a good impression by him, and a brilliant sketch.
Yeah. I think that would have been in one of mine to pick as well. That was almost in there, because I think it's. I'm trying to think if it is before or after Lewinsky now, because he does say that thing where it's like, you promised Mrs. Clinton you wouldn't come into a fast food restaurant anymore. I was like, there's plenty we don't tell Mrs. Clinton about. This is not the worst of her worries.
True, yeah, it might be early doors with it, as in when it was all coming out, so to speak. So next sketch. So this one is, this is a two-person. I think you said that he worked well with Jan Hooks and John Lovitz. I think also, in a few of the sketches, I think he had a real chemistry well with Kevin Nealon. Yes, yeah.
And this is a film with just a two-header with him and Kevin Nealon. The Hostage from 1987. So fairly early on. I think Kevin Nealon was only still a feature player and writer. He hadn't gone to full cast member yet. And it's a one premise sketch. It's a one gag sketch, but it's one of the best of those. And so you've got Phil Hartman playing a completely different character to anything we've talked about. He's this crazy hostage-taking alcoholic madman who's taken this guy hostage, and he wants his wife to pay the ransom, and he's got him holed up in a hotel, and every 2 seconds Kevin Nealon is trying to take the gun off him and escape in the most ridiculous ways possible. His character is just incredible. It's like, I'm a bad mother, this is the fake gun, it's pow pow, you're dead, and just this whole escalating stupidity of, you know what's coming. It's one of those, you know what's coming. And after the first time Kevin Nealon tries to get the gun, he's like, oh, you don't do that, oh, I won't do it again. And then he's like, oh, is that a big spider in the sink? And then he goes for the gun again, and it's pure farce. I think it's one of those SNL sketches where you know what the joke is, and it's just a simple joke, but it's done so well between the two cast members.
Yeah.
And again, it's a different side of Hartman, and it shows how versatile he was in playing different characters. He wasn't always the spokesperson. He always wasn't the quiz show host or the politician or the chef or whatever. He could also play these like seedy criminal characters as well.
Yeah. This is the thing, is if he wasn't so into comedy, I think he'd have been a really successful just character actor.
Oh, brilliant! Yes.
You know, and that's one thing really with his acting career. Didn't see him do. He'd be kind of the straight man, but still, like we said before, the villains and stuff he played. Yeah. He'd be the straight man, but he'd still be hilarious. Do you know what I mean? There's something that maybe we would have seen.
I think he was. That was the thing. He was an actor, but he was also had a comic timing and a sensibility to him. Yeah. I think that's probably what the cast needed at that time. After going from just hiring actors who they thought could say funny lines and be funny, and that bombed. Yeah. Actually getting somebody who was an actor but was also improviser, a writer, although infamously he was the only cast member who was paid the writing wage, even though he never wrote anything.
Very few, to be honest, serious actors do it well. Yeah. Few exceptions, Baldwin. Yep. And Christopher Walken.
Christopher Walken
Christopher just done what he wanted, apparently. Yeah. Just one thing I meant to say when we were doing the talking about the good impressions, or just a few that I think he done really well. As well as Clinton, he done Reagan. Yeah. And there's a few sketches where he's like war hungry Reagan. Yeah. He done Donald Trump on Church Lady.
Yes. First person, I believe, to do Donald Trump on SNL.
And one of my favourites was when he done Charlton Heston reading the audio book of the Madonna Sex Book, which was great. And also he done Michael Caine, and he done Burt Reynolds before Norm. A more accurate impression of Burt Reynolds.
Well, we were talking earlier about silly impressions, which aren't an impression, but are just and that's Norm's impression of.
After rewatching Phil Hartman's impression, it's almost like Norm's trying to do that. He can't not be Norm. Yeah. And also the saying about the jokes that you know are coming, but if they're done well, they're still funny. Yeah. Which is something in this country like the Fast Show would always do. You know the punchline as soon as you see the characters. But have you seen the robot repair sketch where he plays a robot on TV and they keep changing them, and it goes on forever, but it actually gets funnier as it goes along, because it's like it comes back with a different wrong name, and it's like he plays this robot so obviously straight, and does a voice that sounds like it's done by a machine and isn't. It's superb.
Again, with that, another sketch where I nearly picked. Again, him and Nealon is the forgetful waiter. The waiter tries to remember everything as he can't. And it's a simple joke of the waiter, he's forgetting what he wants, bring back stupid things, and keeps going backwards and forward to the kitchen. But there's this Phil Hartman bit, which doesn't get a laugh. And I think it should have got a laugh. And it cracks me up every time. It's probably the third time he's got the order wrong. And Phil Hartman goes, listen, friend. It's just the way he says that. Friend. It's just, you can see the frustration in it, but it's just, I don't know why it doesn't get a laugh.
Maybe he got such a big one at dress that everyone knew it was coming.
Yeah, maybe.
Yes, so I've got one more to mention, haven't I?
Yes, you have, yeah.
Which is just a quickie, really. It's from an update episode or segment of the show where they do the all drug. I can't talk today. I don't know what it is. All drug Olympics, where it's just basically the Olympics and everyone's on drugs, and him weightlifting, and just goes to lift up the weights, and his arms get ripped off, and the arms are on there, and there's blood coming out. He doesn't say anything, but it's the expression on his face, the screaming, and then what always cracks me up is when it goes back to the presenter after this has happened, you see him in the background looking around as if to say, what's just happened? Why are my arms? Why? Just that look of confusion, which shows he could do visual comedy so well as well. And visual comedy, when you say visual comedy, people always think slapstick, falling over, blah, blah. It's not. It's a lot. If you look at Lauren Hardy, a lot of the humour comes from Oliver Hardy just looking at the camera.
Yeah.
And he could do that so well as well. And that's something that no one really talks about when it comes to him.
True. So I think I've left the best till last, personally. I think it's probably it's certainly in any member of SNL at the time has ever mentioned, the writers, the cast members have ever mentioned Phil Hartman sketches. This is one that always comes up, and that is Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer, which is fairly short, written by Jack Handy, who is well known as writing probably the most bizarre but genuinely brilliantly funny sketches. He didn't write that many. He probably had one actual sketch which he had his name on per show, but they were all considered just brilliantly out there. And yeah, it's the story of and it has a song that sets it up because it's a fake TV show.
Yeah.
He was frozen and then unfrozen, and he's a caveman who is a lawyer. He's got this prosthetic on which just sells it, but it's not just that, it's his whole mannerism and everything about. If he didn't have the prosthetic, he would be able to sell it anyway. He's had that skill that Jim Carrey has as well, if he can change his face for whoever he's playing.
It's one of the few times that you do a double take whether it's him or not.
Yeah.
You know.
But it's so well written and delivered. Because I'm just a simple caveman, as your modern world confuses and frightens me. And he's like talking like this. So he's talking like an eloquent lawyer about how he's confused by modern world. And then he starts talking about how Schneider should be paid, and he should never be paid, punitive damages for falling over outside a public library. And it's just a little gem of pure comedy gold. I think it's one of the... And I'm going to go out there and put your complaints in the comments or when you see me, and you know who I'm talking to. If you disagree, but I think it's one of the greatest sketches in the history of SNL. It is.
And it's got the...
brilliant.
It's a sketch, but two sketches in one, really, because then you've got that on next week's show, where it's him on the plane using his excuse just to get drunk.
That's a separate sketch. On next week's show is him running for governor.
Oh, okay, so they've done the sketch.
They did a sketch, they later one of
okay, yeah, because he's on a plane just using it as an excuse to get more alcohol and get drunk. So was it a recurring? I
think it was two or three.
Two or three of them. Okay.
So they didn't overuse it, which is good, because I think it could have been one that might have been overused.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I'll say nowadays, but in the 90s and 2000s, it would have probably been overused. Yeah.
So it reminds me of, which he also done well, but with no dialogue. He done Tarzan, Tonto, and who's the other one?
It was Frankenstein. He was Frankenstein. He was Frankenstein's monster, and then you had Kevin Nealon was Tarzan.
Yeah, and John Lovitz was
John Lovitz was Toto.
Tonto, not Toto. That's a band.
Tonto, yeah, Tonto.
And he is one of them where he breaks.
Yeah.
But he looks away from everyone. Then he has to smash the whole setup, and that works because it's almost like you see him frustrated with fucking up.
Yeah.
But yeah, comedy gold.
And I wanted to throw in an honourable mention as well. I didn't put it in mine because it was when he came back to host. Yeah. But the acting coach, you've seen that
with Will Ferrell. Yeah. And
it's just again him just being absolutely brilliant with this. This is something. This is nothing. This is something. Yeah. This is nothing. Apparently that came from obviously him going to acting lessons and meeting people like that. But he's just got this silly goatee and the hair.
Yeah. I love that sketch because it looks like, and it's you can see the newer cast members idolising him in that.
Oh,
sketch.
yeah,
You can. And I know it's part of the characters, but it looks real, and you can, and seeing him working with Will Ferrell was really cool as well.
Yeah, because I think Will Ferrell was him 10 years later.
Yeah,
I think he took the same role on. Obviously, didn't have the age difference.
Yeah, and not to be honest, not the talent with impressions.
No, but he certainly was used as the glue.
Ferrell saved many a sketch as well.
Yeah.
So, which in that era needed doing a lot.
I think he's. I know Will Ferrell idolises him. I know future cast members who didn't work with him, like Bill Hader, cites him as an inspiration and why they want to be on SNL. And I think he's one of the most important, not even people, one of the most important parts of SNL history.
Yeah.
He's as ingrained in it as Lorne Michaels is.
Yeah. And as I said earlier, I think he was a very, very big reason why the show ran longer than, say, 12 years. Because there's been a few times where it's nearly ended, and at that era was the closest I think it was ever getting to being cancelled.
Well,
apart from maybe after the 1980s, the first series with the new cast. Even though it was better quality
after Lord left,
but then after that there was a bit of a bounce back, and then when it went right down, he pulled it from the grave, so to speak.
Yeah. I think to be fair, the only bit of bounce back they had then was because of Eddie Murphy.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah,
if it wouldn't have been for Eddie Murphy, that would have. What was Joe Piscopo gonna? Carry.
When did that's one thing, because Billy Crystal. Did he cross over with Hartman, or was he just before?
Billy Crystal. Oh, I think Billy Crystal was.
Yeah,
I think he was the last year before the 1985 reboot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
I think he was kind of brought in to fill the Eddie Murphy.
So
star gap.
Yeah, going to say because I've got because obviously it's difficult in this country to get hold of episodes, and I've not seen much of that part of SNL.
Yeah.
But from what I have seen, I've never seen Billy Crystal, I don't think, in a sketch with him, so I don't think they crossed over.
I don't think they did. And I think, I was going to say the year that he came in, so after the fire, we'll call it the fire incident, it was the first time that they'd only been brought back for half a season.
Yeah.
So they're only brought back for 12 shows, not a full season of 24.
Yeah.
So literally, that season was make or break.
Yeah.
And if it hadn't have worked, that would have been the end of SNL in 1986.
Yeah. So, yeah. And luckily, it's been nearly 40 years. Yeah. And I want to see it make 100 years, mainly because I want to live for another 50 years. But also, I want to see it. And it's good at the moment because people are talking about SNL again because of the anniversary.
Yeah.
Even it's making sort of headlines in this country, which is really cool. Normally, it would only make a headline in this country if, like when Trump was on it and there was controversy and that sort of thing. But people are enjoying it again, mostly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What else on Hartman? I mean, to be fair, we've covered it quite quickly.
We have, yeah.
But unlike with a lot of other people, it's like with Dan Aykroyd's last episode, he starred in a lot of things outside of, whereas we can't really talk about news radio because of being in the UK. But yeah, as I say, he's one of those that whenever he pops up, if you're half watching something, you pay attention because you know it's going to be gold.
I think it's incredible to think that he was so huge and so important, but it wasn't his. I guess it's a testament to his person, but it was never his intention to be famous or a comedian, or even when he was on SNL, he would always be. There's stories of people would walk past his office and he'd be there reading a book about flying a plane, and then a week later he'd have flying lessons, and then he was flying a plane and he could fly a plane. He'd think about he'd be looking at a magazine about boats, and then he'd buy a boat and go fishing.
Yeah.
And his mind was always his life was his life and him enjoying living his life. Yeah. And he was a very family man, and that sounds very bittersweet really to think about in hindsight, but he was a family man and all the rest of it, and he didn't want to be famous, but he just enjoyed making comedy and making people laugh, and he enjoyed working with the people that he worked with.
And he owned a graphic design business the whole time as well, didn't he? Which he was sort of semi-running while I don't know. Well, we'll say as well, we haven't, and we don't want to really talk about what happened at the end of his life. No. But, if you don't know, UK listeners might not know. It's not nice, but do Google it if you feel the need. It's just something we don't want to. We want to talk the positives, really. Don't we?
It's not something to bring on it, but it's it was just a genuine, true tragedy.
Yeah,
and someone who had so much more to give. Yeah, I think, and who knows what he could have.
Well, one of the saddest things I think I've ever seen on TV in my life is when, I don't know if it's an anniversary show or just after, and there's a tribute to him on SNL, and Lovett's trying to talk about him and getting so emotional. It's horrible to see, but it shows how loved he was. And it's very rare actually that I'm like this with someone I've never met. I can just talk about, and no, it was horrible. But in the 9 years on SNL and the stuff he'd done after and before, he left a lot of stuff to be enjoyed. And big recommendation: just go on YouTube and find sketches.
Pretty much I'd say his entire bank was, but he was doing 10 sketches per episode for 9 years for 24 shows. So there's a lot. He did a lot of sketches, but a lot of them are on SNL, and official SNL have posted them themselves on their official YouTube page. Again, that's a fitting tribute to him. Half of their content seems to be Phil Hartman on there. So
I will add as well that how a big streaming service has bought up all the WWE and has made room to put it on the streaming service. SNL's a thing as well, I know. Yeah, we like that.
Just bring Peacock. Bring Peacock over to the UK.
Yeah,
I don't want to have to pay for VPN, NordVPN. I don't have to pay for you. This episode was sponsored by Nord. If we ever get a sponsorship deal for NordVPN, now this is going to be my.
No one else will get a sponsorship by from Fridays or something. Or the UK Saturday Live. I don't care what anyone says. That was rubbish.
Saturday Live. Oh, what you besmirching the quality of Ben Elton?
There was some good sketches, but overall it didn't work.
Simon Munnery was on that. Well, that's when I first saw Simon Munnery.
Loads of money was on it.
Loads of money. Yeah,
If you're American and listening, and the UK in the 90s was terrible for just shouting a catchphrase and calling it comedy, to the point of we were all laughing because we didn't know what else to do.
British comedy gets a bad name in America, and I think horribly so generally, apart from there was a period in the 90s where we were not doing our best work.
But then some of my favourite comedy ever is British stuff from the 90s, but not necessarily the commercial stuff. And also, if you are listening in America and you've seen Mrs. Brown's Boys, we're sorry.
We are so sorry.
Oh God.
We know that dressing up in drag and doing a funny voice is not funny anymore. We know that.
Yeah.
Trust me, we know that.
And I'd say it's worse than what you done to Men Behaving Badly.
But not worse than what you did to Only Fools and Horses.
I haven't seen that. Who was in it?
It was a very recent thing, I think. It had that... I can't remember what is... Yeah.
Him.
Actually, no. What did you say was the bad remake? Men Behaving Badly. Worst American remake. I'm sorry. Was One Foot in the Grave.
I haven't seen that.
Cosby, as it was known.
Oh, they did do that with him, didn't they?
Well, he did do it with Cosby,
yeah. Oh,
be ashamed, American listeners. We love you for listening, but,
Well, hopefully they'll reboot it with Bill Cosby and it'll be 2 feet in the grave. Sorry, that was harsh of me. I do apologise.
Can I just point out, I'm very, very happy that we mentioned Paul Rubens. I didn't mention anything about him jacking off in a cinema.
Good.
Well, I just did. Here we go.
To be honest with you, well done, lad. It was an adult cinema.
It was an adult cinema.
Yeah.
I just want him to have been Pee Wee Herman who's doing it.
That's Adam Sandler.
No, Adam Sandler got it from there.
Have you seen the it's kind of on subject, when he did come back and it was an award ceremony or something, and he's on stage as Pee Wee Herman, and there's this massive standing ovation because what happened there was the media picking on someone.
Yeah.
I said that before, because sadly we've lost him as well now. And he just about had that comeback before he died. They done there was a more recent film and he was working and what a talented guy.
Brilliantly talented.
And he's forgotten as well that Phil Hartman co-created that character, or
Yeah.
co-wrote the.
Well, yeah, co-created and and
the series and the film. So yeah, amazing stuff. And did he ever? Yeah, Pee Wee hosted SNL.
well, no, so
in character.
So John is only the second person in character to host SNL, and Phil Hartman was credited on that episode as a writer because he came along to co-write the Pee Wee Herman stuff.
Oh, of course. Right.
So his first job actually on SNL was as a credited writer for one episode, for the Pee Wee Herman episode.
Ah, cool. I remember that. That was one that I have seen the full episode because when they showed him on Sky over years ago. But even then, they showed him like 15 years behind. Who was the first person to host in character then?
See, I'm going to get the character's name wrong now. He was a member of the original cast, and it was the Italian priest, Father...
Oh, the guy he used to come on an update and stuff.
Yes, he used to come on update.
Yeah.
Father. He hosted 3 times.
Yeah.
Father.
I can't. Yeah, I know exactly who you mean. But
he was basically the original church lady.
Yeah.
But the opposite of church lady. He was a priest who was very unpriest-like. He used to smoke and drink and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, yeah. And Andrew Dice Clay was a character as well. Apparently, he hosted.
Yeah, Andrew Dice Clay. Yeah.
Hickory dickory dock.
Again, be ashamed of that, Americans. I mean, we take full responsibility for. So you don't get our bad comedians. In America, they
I stand by Andrew Dice Clay. If it was just a character, a minor character in something, would be funny. But he got huge, didn't it? He was playing stadiums and stuff.
Well, he wasn't a character.
Well, I've heard that he's quite a nice bloke, but. I think he done a Hogan and became the character.
Yeah. Forgot what kayfabe was.
Yeah. So should we sort of wrap it up?
We should.
What we'll do, we haven't decided what the next episode will be, so we'll let you all know via the socials, shall we?
Yes, we're all on the socials.
We've got to discuss it. And I think we should come out. I think we should stick with just doing. White, straight. No, we've got to mix up a bit and get someone different for the next one. We'll have a think. We would open it up and maybe do a vote, but I've got another podcast where I've asked for audience participation, and frankly, humans are rubbish. You're all terrible. So we'll decide, and then we'll see later on. Maybe we'll do a vote, and maybe the last episode of the season.
Yeah.
We could just get anyone we haven't done, and then we'll research and do one on it.
That sounds like a good idea. But it might be as successful as what was that? I can't remember the vote they did on SNL that Al Franken did once. Was if someone was going to get fired or not.
Oh, Andy Kaufman.
Was that Andy Kaufman?
Yeah, he got fired. Yeah.
He got fired, didn't he? Yeah.
Did you see? I haven't seen much of the anniversary, but I loved the top 10 update presenters. Did you see that?
Yeah.
That made me crack up.
Didn't the one with a lobster as well? Where they were going to kill a lobster or not?
Oh, they might have done.
And then they didn't kill the lobster, but then the week later they ended up killing the lobster anyway.
Yeah. Right, thanks all for listening.
Yes, thank you.
Follow us on. We're on. We've got a Facebook page now.
We've got Facebook. Instagram is coming very, very soon.
Yeah, and we are on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music for podcasts, and
Apple.
Yeah, we're on all of them at the minute. Hopefully, if we don't get kicked off. And follow, share, like, rate, comment. Let's get talking. If you disagree with anything we say, you're wrong, but we'll have a conversation with you.
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, we're looking for comments. I've already had a couple of face-to-face comments about some comments I made last time. I stand by them.
We'll talk about that when we're off air.
But yeah, honestly, we want to have this conversation. We want to hear from fellow SNL fans. So yeah.
We'll say farewell.
Indeed.
And good night.
Bye-bye.